Well, Russia has officially registered their new vaccine that I talked about, I guess it was last week or so. Um, I and, well, many others, people generally seem to be very skeptical of it because it happens so quick. You know, you don't normally get vaccines this quick. And I found it kind of funny that people were expressing skepticism at the Russian vaccine, because normally anyone who expresses, uh, you know, any sort of skepticism at any vaccine is called an evil anti-vaxxer. They hate science and they want children to die. That's normally what happens if you kind of say, I might not want to be the first person to take this vaccine. Oh my God, how can you not trust the science? Well, I guess in this case it's okay because Russia bad. And so it's perfectly acceptable to not trust the science. And by trust the science, they mean the scientists, because of course scientists are the priests of the new atheistic religion. And so Putin held some kind of a meeting where the press was present. He had a bunch of government people around him, and he said, we've officially registered our vaccine with, international agencies. It's now on the record. It's real. It exists. And we are ready to go into production. And, when I talked about this before, they were kind of in the final stages. They were pretty much sure that it was done, but they hadn't put pen to paper yet. Now, the interesting thing here is that now that it's official, there seems to be quite the concerted effort on the part of the Western media to essentially, make people skeptical about this Russian vaccine and make sure that they are absolutely sure that, hey, this is totally unproven. You don't want to take this kind of thing, not that it's available to Americans anyway. But again, this is just kind of funny, because I'm sure if this were Moderna and not the Russian government coming out with this vaccine, the Western media would be completely on board with it, and would be castigating anyone who raised, even a modicum of skepticism about such a rapid development for this vaccine. Scott Gottlieb, probably the most notable voice against this vaccine at the moment. He said on CNBC that he would not take it. And honestly, that's where I'm at too, because I don't want to be the first person to take this thing. I don't want to get sick, even though I'm a younger person. Honestly, I don't even know, based on, the research that was done with SARS vaccines, I don't even know if a vaccine for this virus is, possible, on a permanent basis. It might just be that by the time, it's kind of like the flu, you get a vaccine for this, well, then it mutates, and then, you get it again. Or in the case of the SARS vaccine, you take the vaccine, and, it gives you some immunity for a little bit, and then if you get infected with the virus later on, you get a much worse reaction. So no matter who's making the vaccine, I want to see sort of how this affects other people before I see how it affects me. I don't want to be the guinea pig by any stretch. Now, Putin is trying to alleviate some of these fears that people, would have by including his own daughter, apparently, in these trials. Now, they're not saying which of his daughters. Apparently, he has 2 adult daughters, and one of them was involved in this trial. She took the vaccine and is apparently fine. She had a bit of a mild fever. But other than that, everything, is supposed to be hunky-dory. And so this is Putin's way of sort of expressing confidence in it, saying, see, I would subject my own family to this, and so obviously I have faith that it is safe. And I think that's a smart move on his part, if he indeed, does think that it works. Now, the other way you can look at that is that, Putin gave it to his daughter first, because she's a member of the elite and he wants her to be safe. And that, apparently there are reports of other Russian elites receiving, test doses of this vaccine back in April. Well, to me, if there was any hint on the part of the Russians that this vaccine was at all dangerous, I don't think that the elites would be the ones taking it first. You would try and experiment on the poor and the homeless to see how they reacted. You sure wouldn't use Princess Putin as a guinea pig. And so at the very least, to me, my initial impressions on this, because of course we have no data yet, is that the vaccine then is probably something that's safe to take, but I still don't know if it will be effective in actually repelling the virus. Because just from I'm obviously not a scientist or anything like that. I don't study epidemiology or viruses or things like that. But just based on what we know from the research that was done into SARS, it seems like, and of course the common cold, these types of viruses, coronaviruses, apparently are just very hard to vaccinate against. And so therefore, what you really need is an effective form of treatment. A vaccine might work for a little while, but it's not going to work forever, is generally the conclusion that most of the experts that I've researched seem to come to. Now, getting back to the Western media and folks like Scott Gottlieb, it's quite interesting that Zero Hedge pointed out about Gottlieb that apparently he's on the board of Pfizer, which, of course, the former director of the FDA, why would he not be taking a handout from Pfizer? Obviously, Pfizer would want somebody like Scott Gottlieb on their board to give them more influence and leverage over the federal government. That's how the relationship between regulatory agencies and corporations work. I mean, people don't realize that the major corporations in each field set up these regulatory agencies initially. At least in many cases. I don't think that that Pfizer actually set up the FDA, although I'd have to look into that. I think it was more involved with companies like Borden. I think that the food industry was much more involved with setting up the FDA than the drug industry or the pharmaceuticals. I don't think that they were that big at the time. And then, of course, the FDA was also seen as a sort of a spiritual project. It was something that a lot of post-millennial Christians, had a big stake in, and I won't get into the details of that, at this time. But suffice it to say, Pfizer is developing their own Wu flu vaccine, their own SARS-CoV-2, their own COVID vaccine. And so Gottlieb has a significant financial interest in, poo-pooing any vaccine that is not made by Pfizer. And apparently he's also been quite critical of the Moderna vaccine, which the media, for the most part, has been in love with and has been just, oohing and ahhing over almost as much as they do over Fauci. And so I can't really say that I trust Gottlieb or any of the mainstream media, because the mainstream media in general is going to be on the side of Big Pharma. And again, this is not because they're necessarily paid off by Big Pharma. I think this is very similar to what they were doing, with hydroxychloroquine. It's more that the way that these sorts of influence operations work, the way that the mainstream media is corrupt, is not that these reporters are directly paid by certain interests to espouse certain opinions or to have a certain editorial slant to their reporting. The way that it works is kind of how Noam Chomsky described it. It's that these journalists believe everything that they say, but simply that if they did not believe those things, they would not be in the positions they are in. Meaning that the kinds of people who are hired to be these mainstream media journalists are going to be very skeptical of any sort of data or treatments that goes against the interests of these pharmaceutical companies. And so if you kind of think what their natural inclination is in their head, the mainstream media folks are going to be very skeptical of anything, of any sort of solution to this whole pandemic that isn't a vaccine developed by an American company. That's really what they want. They don't want hydroxychloroquine, because that's not a vaccine that anyone in America can make money off of, and they don't want a Russian vaccine because then the Russians are making the money off of it. What they want is an American vaccine by an American company. That's what they're comfortable with. It's not necessarily about the financial interest for them. That's just how their mind works. That's what they're comfortable with mentally, psychologically. And so because of that, it'll be very interesting to me to see, we've already seen very promising results with hydroxychloroquine, and the media is still completely opposed to that. It'll be very interesting to see what happens with this Russian vaccine if it too is successful. Because then, these folks will really have nothing to do. There'll be two, pretty great solutions to end this pandemic, and neither of them will be the solution that they want. And so that would be, quite interesting to watch. And perhaps because of it, especially if, Biden gets elected, and the mainstream media opinion kind of becomes gospel within the White House. And again, I'm not saying that Trump is some superhero who's going to save us. All I'm saying is that, if Biden's in power, I don't think that we're going to be getting any Russian vaccines. nor will we be getting, any sort of mass distribution of hydroxychloroquine and that whole treatment regime. And so it might come to the point to where the U.S. might, maybe is one of the countries where the pandemic lasts the longest, because we refuse to take the outs, that are offered to us. I mean, I don't know. We're still a long way off. We need to see some data, but just the way that things are being presented right now, it seems like people care much more about their own, personal interests, about their, their sort of political views, than they do about actually helping other people. So with that said, if you gained anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe, because I do upload every day and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.